Good afternoon. From the KUOW newsroom, this is Seattle Now. I'm Zaki Hamid. Thank you to all who donated to our winter fundraising drive last week, and a reminder that it's not too late to contribute. Coming up, a look at what help and resources flood-affected people in Washington have. It's Monday, December 22nd. We'll start the show today focused on flood recovery. Governor Bob Ferguson is mobilizing the National Guard to monitor our local levees following last week's levee failures in Tukwila and Pacific. While the current risk has been described as moderate, he says,
the risk of a breach is still real. This is an extremely unpredictable situation. Weather is unpredictable. Debris is unpredictable. Things are very unpredictable. 50 National Guard troops will be keeping an eye on the levees. Over the weekend, the governor also announced he's mobilizing a second strike team to repair the levees if another one fails. The National Guard has been deployed in Washington since Governor Ferguson declared a state of emergency a couple of weeks ago. Another atmospheric river is forecast to arrive early next week. Looking to get rid of flood debris? The King County Solid Waste Division will accept it free of charge on weekends through January 11th. Individual customers can take their loads to the Bow Lake, Shoreline, and Enumclaw recycling and transfer stations Saturdays and Sundays. How much water hammered Western Washington this month? Scott Greenstone has been talking with experts to get an estimate.
Imagine 3 Lake Washingtons. That's how much water fell just on the I-5 corridor from December 9th to 19th. Actually, even more than that, according to estimates from the Center for Western Weather and Water Extremes at UC San Diego, 9 million acre-feet, which is almost 4 Lake Washingtons.
9 million acre-feet is a big amount of water, for sure.
Ryan Torn at University at Albany double-checked the math. Torn said this atmospheric river wasn't the most intense, but it lasted so long.
The fact that it just kind of sat over the Washington for several days at a time is what really made it extreme.
Rivers from the Canadian border down to the Oregon border were inundated. Scott Greenstone, KUOW News.
Good weather news for skiers. We've got enough snow for the season to get started at some resorts. Summit West at Snoqualmie Pass opens with limited operations tomorrow. Mount Baker opened up today. Crystal Mountain and Mission Ridge have both been open since the weekend, but Stevens Pass is still closed. Now for some business news. We're 2 years into Seattle's gig worker minimum wage. A new study shows that Seattle food delivery drivers now have more unpaid idle time and drive longer distances between tasks. Andy Guerin is a labor economist and co-author of the study published by the National Bureau of Economic Research. He notes that drivers were earning more on average in the first month after Seattle's gig worker law took effect.
By month 2, they're spending more time idle, they're driving further between trips, which means that they are making less pay per day that they're out there looking for work.
Over time, their earnings didn't change much compared to before the new wages kicked in, he says. The study looked at data from an app that helps drivers track their earnings and mileage. In legal news, a federal court has ruled against the University of Washington, handing a win to a UW professor over land acknowledgements. Scott Greenstone has more.
Around 2020, UW started recommending adding land acknowledgements of native tribes to syllabi. Stuart Regis teaches computer science. He added this instead.
I acknowledge that by the labor theory of property, the Coast Salish people can claim historical ownership of almost none of the land currently occupied by the University of Washington.
Regis says there weren't tribal settlements where UW's campus is today. The university removed the statement and let a third of his students leave class.
That's a classic thing that's considered, a retaliation for speech.
Last week, a Ninth Circuit panel agreed with him. The university says it's evaluating next steps. Scott Greenstone, KUOW News.
some policing news. New data shows Washington state troopers made fewer traffic stops last year than the year before, but they are still stopping people of color at a higher rate than white drivers. The Washington State Standard reports that black drivers were almost twice as likely as white drivers to be stopped. Hispanic drivers were also stopped more often. Native Americans were less likely to be stopped than other people of color, but they were 4 times more likely to be searched by officers compared to white drivers. State Patrol Captain Dion Glover told state lawmakers earlier this month that the agency needs to work to close the racial gaps in traffic stops. Advocates are continuing to try to pass new limits on traffic stops for non-moving violations like expired tabs or broken headlights. Advocates say officers are more likely to stop drivers of color for these types of violations. Seattle's longest-serving police chief passed away last week at 95 years old. Patrick Fitzsimmons led the Seattle Police Department for 15 years. He was appointed to the position in 1979, shortly after a scandal where high-ranking members of the department were involved in a gambling and vice protection racket. The Seattle Times reports he was known for bringing change to the department with a disciplinary approach that was seen as tough but fair. He also attempted to change the city's crowd control policy after a Fat Tuesday celebration turned into a riot. Accusations of police brutality went up as 90 partygoers and 30 officers were hurt. His memorial service will be held next month. Now for some art news. A collective of Seattle women meet monthly to make art and share experiences of having a spouse or family member in jail. Now they're showing work at the King Street station. KNKX arts and culture reporter Freddie Monares has more.
The group consists of artists, attorneys, and community organizers. They say they found healing through making art together. Attorney Martina Cartman used photos of people in jail for her collages.
So I cut them out of those pictures and I put them on these dreamyscapes. Yeah, and I think it's funny and silly and sweet. And also I firmly believe that when we can imagine something different, it actually does chart a path toward freedom.
Artist Steph Marchand, a member of the Colville tribe, drew people wearing native regalia on official Washington Department of Corrections documents.
So it's a range from violations to release paperwork to a log, just to show where they have to log every little piece of their property.
The free exhibition, titled Living and Loving Under the Carceral State, is showing at King Street Station through February 7th. In Seattle, I'm Freddie Monares.
We'll close the show with some flood recovery resources. Recovery is ongoing in Washington state, and we still don't know how many people have been affected or even when the water will fully recede. For people starting to clean up, the safety issues are serious. Floodwaters can bring sewage and bacteria, which cause mold and other hazards. To find out more about what's ahead in the recovery process, Monica Nicholsberg spoke with Kim Malcolm on All Things Considered.
Monica, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Can affected property owners expect to get help from insurance?
Unfortunately, most typical homeowners and renters insurance policies don't cover this type of flooding. So usually to get help with those repairs, you would need to have a separate flood insurance policy.
And do we know how many properties in Washington are covered by flood insurance?
Yeah, it's about 50,000 homes and businesses in Washington that have flood insurance between the program that FEMA administers and the private market. That's about half the number of people who were advised to evacuate at the height of the flooding. It doesn't mean all of those homes were damaged, but we just don't know at this point. In general, experts say that a lot more people should have flood insurance than do.
Yeah. Is there clarity, Monica, on what resources are available to property owners who don't have flood insurance?
It's a little bit of a wait and see. It really depends whether the president signs off on a federal disaster declaration and at the same time authorizes FEMA to provide that individual assistance to households. That would be different than the federal emergency that's already been declared, which is really more about providing life-saving first responder emergency relief from FEMA. So right now, the counties that have a lot of flooding are running these surveys to assess the damage. And then Governor Ferguson will use the data collected in those surveys to make his case for a federal disaster declaration. So if you're a property owner who has damage, you should go to your county website and fill out this survey.
Monica, how about any resources available at the local level?
Yeah, so damaged properties might also be able to get relief from state and local property taxes. Again, the county websites have details on that. And even though homeowners insurance doesn't typically cover flood damage, your auto insurance might. So if your car was damaged, you should check your policy.
Okay. So if you're in this situation, what do officials recommend that you do to document the damage to your home or business in the best possible way?
They're recommending taking lots of photos and videos and keeping all of the receipts that you get for repairs and cleanup that you might hire out. The county surveys have detailed lists of everything that should be documented with photos and videos to support the claims.
All right. And then just apply and hope for the best. KUOW's Monica Nicholsberg, thank you so much for this.
Thanks for having me, Kim.
That's all for today from the KUOW Newsroom in Seattle. Our producer is Brooklyn Jamerson Flowers. The interview in today's episode was produced by John O'Brien. I'm Zaki Hamid. Seattle Now and KUOW are members of the NPR network. Be kind to each other and have a great week.